Καλημέρα σε όλες και όλους. Επειδή άκουσα ότι θα υπάρξουν κάποιες ομιλίες που τις αξίζει ο Γιώργος, θα ήθελα και εγώ εκ μέρους της Μητροπόλεως και εκ μέρους των αδελφών και συλλειτουργών Πατρός Γεωργίου και Πατρός Γεωργίου, αλλά και εκ μέρους του χορού των Ιεροψαλτών, θα ήθελα να ευχηθώ στο Γιώργο καλό ταξίδι. Γιώργο, έφυγες νέος, έφυγες όμως έτοιμος για να δεις το Δημιουργό σου. Και μέσα στα χρόνια αυτά που έζησες, στα χρόνια που σε γνώρισα, είμαι σίγουρος ότι το πνευματικό διαβατήριο που έχει ο καθένας μας, όλοι μας, κληρικοί και λαϊκοί, που έχουμε το πνευματικό διαβατήριο, το γέμισες με πνευματικές βίζες. Ήσουνα ελεήμων, η καρδιά σου ήταν μεγάλη, ενδιαφερόσουν για όλους και έβλεπες το πρόβλημα όλων πριν οι άλλοι ξέρουν το πρόβλημά τους. Και εγώ και ο πατήρ Γεώργιος και ο άλλος πατήρ Γεώργιος έχουμε εμπειρίες από τη φιλανθρωπία σου, από την αγάπη σου για τον πρώτο και τον τελευταίο της ζωής. Γι' αυτόν που σκούπιζε τα πεζοδρόμια έξω από το μαγαζί σου ή γι' αυτόν που ήταν διευθυντής στο μαγαζί σου. Γιώργο, αυτά θα πάρεις μαζί σου. Αυτά παίρνεις μαζί σου σήμερα. Γι' αυτό και όλος ετούτος ο κόσμος είναι σήμερα να σου πει καλό ταξίδι. Άκη, είναι γεγονός ότι θα μας λείψει ο Γιώργος. Θα λείψει σε εσάς, θα λείψει σε μας, θα λείψει σε αυτούς που βοηθούσε χωρίς να το ξέρουμε. Όμως τελείωσε τα 58 χρόνια του κύκλου της ζωής του και τώρα πορεύεται να αντικρίσει τον Δημιουργό και να του πει αυτά μπόρεσα να κάνω. Και είναι πολλά αυτά που έκανε. Μαζί μας σήμερα τιμούν τον Γιώργο ο πρόεδρος της Ομοσπονδίας, τιμούν τον Γιώργο ο άρχοντας του Πατριαρχείου ο Γιάννης ο Φιλίππου. Είσαστε όλοι εσείς να του δείξετε την αγάπη σας. Γιώργο, καλό ταξίδι, καλό παράδεισο, θα είσαι πάντα στις προσευχές μας για μια ήσυχη, ήρεμη ζωή κοντά στο θρόνο της χάριτος. Ευλογητός ο Θεός ημών, πάντοτε νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων. Άμμο εν οδό, αλληλούια, ευλογητός η Κύριε, δίδαξον με τα δικαιώματά σου, αλληλούια.
Επεπόθησεν η ψυχή μου, του επιθυμήσε τα κρίματα σου έμπαντι καιρό, αλληλούια.
Κλείνω την καρδία στα μαρτύρια σου και εμείς πλέον εξία, αλληλούια.
Αθηνία κατέστε με απόμακρον, τον εγγενανιβανόν τον νόμο σου, αλληλούια.
Μέτοχος εγώ είμαι πάντων των φοβουμένων, ευλογημένον σε και των φυλασσόντων τα σέντολά σου. Αλληλούια.
Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίο Πνεύματι.
Ελέησον ημάς ο Θεός κατά το μέγα έλεος σου, δεόμεθά σου επάκουσον και ελέησον. Έτι δεόμεθα υπερμακαρίας μνήμης και αιωνίου αναπαύσεως της ψυχής του κοιμηθέντος δούλου του Θεού και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου και υπέρ του συγχωρηθήνε αυτό παν πλημέλημα εκούσιον τε και ακούσιον. Όπως Κύριος ο Θεός ημών τάξει την ψυχήν αυτού, εν θα οι δίκαιοι αναπαύονται, τα ελέη του Θεού την βασιλείαν των ουρανών και άφεσιν των αυτού αμαρτιών, παρά Χριστό το αθανάτο βασιλεί και Θεό ημών ετισόμεθα.
Πάσχο Κύριε,
του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν.
Ότι εσύ Ανάστα ζωή και μακαρή ανάπαυσης του κοιμηθέντος δούλου Θεού και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου. Χριστέ ο Θεός ημών και δόξα να πέμπομεν συν τον Άρχο σου Πατρί, το Παναγίο και αγαθό ζωοποιό σου πνεύματι, νικαία ή και σε αιώνας των αιώνων.
Σώσον με, ότι τα δικαιώματά σου εξεζήτησα. Ελέησον με, Κύριε.
Από των κρημάτων σου ουκ εξέκλεινα, ότι εσύ ενομοθέτησας με. Ελέησον με, Κύριε.
Επίβλεψον έπε με και ελεησόν με κατά το κρίμα των αγαπώντων το όνομά σου. Αλληλούια.
Νεότερος εγώ είμαι και εξουδενωμένος, τα δικαιώματα σου ουκ επελαθόμην. Αλληλούια.
Άκουσον, Κύριε, κατά το έλεος σου, κατά το κρίμα σου ζήσομε. Αλληλούια.
Άρχοντες κατεδίωξαν με δωρεάν και
και τα κρίματά σου βοηθήσει.
Επανήσιν ως πρόβατον Απόλλωνος, ζήτησον τον δούλο σου, ότι τα σέντολά σου ουκ επελαθώμη.
Του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν, ότι η Ανάστασης, η ζωή και η μακαρία ανάπαυσης του κοιμηθέντος δούλου σου και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου, Χριστέ ο Θεός ημών, και εσύ την δόξαν αναπέμπομεν, το Πατρί και το Υιό και το Αγίο Πνεύματι, νύνε και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων. Ευλογητός η Κύριε, διδαξών με τα δικαιώματά σου, των Αγίων όχορος, ευρεπηγήν της ζωής και θύραν παραδείσου, ευροκαγώ την οδόν δια της μετανοίας, το απολολός προβατών εγώ ημί, ανακάλεσέ με, σωτήρ και σώσον με.
Ευλογητός η Κύριε, διδαξών με τα δικαιώματα σου οπάλεμεν, εκμειόντων πλάσασμε και εικόνη σου θεία τιμήσας, παραβάση εντολής δε πάλι με επιστρέψας, εις γυναίξης ελήφθην, εις το καθομοίο συνεπανάγαγε, το αρχαίον κάλος αναμορφώσαστε.
Ευλογητός η Κύριε, διδαξών με τα δικαιώματά σου, εικόνη και σαρή του δόξη σου, και στίγματα θεοπτεσμάτων, κτήσον όσον πλάσμα δέσποτα, και καθάρισον σιές πλαχνίδια, και την ποθήνη πατρίδα παράσχονη, παραδείσου πάλι ποιον πολύτιμε.
Ευλογητός η Κύριε, διδαξών με τα δικαιώματά σου, ανάπαυσον ο Θεός τον δούλο σου και κατάταξον αυτόν εν παραδείσου, όπου χωρί των Αγίων Κύριε, και οι εκλάψους συνος προστήλες, τον κεκοιμημένον δούλο σου ανάπαυσον, παραλών αυτού πάντα τα αμαρτήματα.
Δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίο Πνεύματι,
Τρίλαμπες.
τρίλαμπες της Θείας Θεότητος, ευσεβόσιν ίσον ερχόντες, Αγίος ή, ο Πατήρ ο άναρχος, ο συνάναρχος Υιός, και Θείο Πνεύμα, φώτισαν ημάς πίστης ηλατρέχοντας, και του αιωνίου πυρός εξάπλαστον.
Και νικαία και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων, αμήν. Χαίρες δέμνη, εις Θεός αρχιτεκούσα εις παντός σωτηρίαν, εις γένος των ανθρώπων έβρατο της σωτηρίαν, δια σου έβριμεν παράδεισον, Θεοτόκιαν η ευλογημένη.
Αλληλούια, 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 δόξα σοι ο Θεός.
Αλληλούια, 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 δόξα σοι ο Θεός.
Αλληλούια, 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 δόξα σοι ο Θεός.
Μετά των Αγίων ανάπαυσον Χριστέ,
αρχίσεις εσύ. Θέλεις να αρχίσεις εσύ. Θέλεις. Ψάλ' το εσύ.
Του βίου τρυφή διαμένη λύπης αμέτωχος, ποια δόξα έστι και νεπηγής αμετάθετος, πάντα σκιάς ασθενέστερα, πάντα ονείρων απατηλότερα, μία ροπή και ταύτα, πάντα θάνατος διαδέχεται, άλεντο φώτη Χριστέ, του προσώπου σου και το γλυκασμό της εις, ωραιότητος, ον εξελέξω, ανάπαυσον ως φιλάνθρωπος.
Ως άνθος μαραίνεται και όσον αρπαρέρχεται και διαλύεται πας άνθρωπος, πάλιν δε ηχούσεις της άλπιγγος, νεκρίος εν συσσισμό, πάντες αναστήσονται προς την συνυπάντησιν Χριστέ ο Θεός, τότε δέσποτα, ον μετέστησας εξ ημών, έντες των Αγίων σου κατάταξον σκηνές, το πνεύμα του σου δούλου Χριστέ.
Πάντα ματαιότης τα ανθρώπινα, όσα ουκ υπάρχει μετά θάνατος, που παραμένει ο πλούτος, που συνοδεύει η δόξα, και περσόν καλός θάνατος, αυτά πάντα εξυφάνιστε. Διό Χριστό το αθανάτο βασίλη βοήσομεν, τον μεταστάντα εξ ημών ανάπαυσον, εν τα πάντων εστιν εφαινομένων η κατοικία.
Όντως φοβερότατο το του θανάτου μυστήριο, ως ψυχή του σώματος βιαίως χωρίζεται εκ της αγωνίας και της συμφίας.
Θα πάω να θυμιάσω στους μακαρισμούς. Θα πάω. Χήμη και υπόσταση στο πλαστουργόν σου γέγονε πρόσταγμα, βουληθείς γαρ εξάωρα του τε και ώρα της μεζών, συμπήξε φύσεως, γήθεν μου το σώμα διέπλασας, δε δοκας δε μη ψυχήν, τη Θεία σου και ζώπιο εμπνεύσει, διό Χριστέ των δούλων σου εν χώρα ζώντων, εν σκηνές δικαίων κατάταξον.
Ανάπαυσον σωτήριμος ζωοδότα, ον μετέστησας αδελφών ημών, εκ των προχέρων κράζοντα δόξα συν.
Μακάρι ελεήμονες, ότι αυτοί ελεηθήσονται, ληστήν του παραδείσου Χριστέ πολίτην, επί σταυρούσι βοήσαντα, το μνηστητή μου προαπηργάσω, αυτού της μετανοίας αξίωσον καμέ των αναξίων.
Μακάρι καθαρή τη καρδία, ότι αυτοί των Θεών όψονται, ζωής ο Κυριεύων και του θανάτου, εν τες αυλές Αγίων ανάπαυσον, ον προσελάβου εκ των προτέρων βόντα, νησιτή μου, όταν έρθεις εν τη βασιλεία σου.
και χρώμεν της ο φρούτος
δόξα Πατρί και Υιό και Αγίο Πνεύματι, ανάρχο και γεννήσιτε και πρόδο, Πατέρα προσκυνώ τον γεννήσαντα, Υιόν δοξάζω τον γεννηθέντα, υμνότος συνεκλάμπων, Πατρίτε και Υιό Πνεύμα Άγιον.
Μακαρία η οδός, η πορεύση,
Άρε Γιώργο, καλό ταξίδι.
ότι η βάστηση, όπως αναπαύσεω.
Μακαρία η οδός, η πορεύει σήμερον, ότι τιμάσισι τόπος αναπαύσεως.
Μακαρία η οδός, η πορεύει σήμερον, ότι τιμάσισι όπως αναπαύσεως.
Προσέχει επικράτησον με ο Θεός μου,
Πρόσχομεν.
ως Θεσσαλονικής νότης επιστολής Παύλου,
Σοφία.
αδελφοί, που θέλω ημάς αγνοήτων των κεκτημένων, ή να μην λυπήσε, καθώς και εκείνοι έχοντες ελπίδα, λίγα πιστεύουμε ότι Ιησούς απέθανε και ανέστη, ούτω και ο Θεός τους κοιμηθέντας δια του Ιησού, άξις είναι αυτό. Του το γαλήνι λέγουμε εν λόγω Κυρίου, ότι εμείς οι ζώντες, οι περιλυπόμενοι στην παρουσία του Κυρίου, που μη φτάσουμε στιγμηθέντας, ότι αυτός ο Κύριος εντελέσου, εν φωνή αρχαγγέλου, εσάτου του Θεού καταβήσεται από ουρανού, και είναι κρύε Χριστόνας της ο νεκρότου, έπειτα εμείς οι ζώντες, οι περιλυπόμενοι, άμα συναυτής αρπαγισόμεθα εν εφέλες, εις απάντηση του Κυρίου Ισαέλ. Και ούτω πάντοτε στην Κυρία εσώμεθα.
Ειρήνηση των αδεινόσκονται και παντή το λαό.
Σοφία ορθή ακούσαμεν του Αγίου Ευαγγελίου.
Ειρήνη πάση
Και το πρωτομάτι σου,
Κατά Ιωάννα Ιωάννα
Πρόσχομεν.
Ήκεν ο Κύριος προσφυλθώντας προς αυτόν Ιουδαίους, αμήν, αμήν λέω εμείς, ότι τον λόγο μου ακρόν και πιστεύουν το πέμψαν τίνε, έχει ζωή αιώνιον, και εις κρίσιν ουκ έρχεται, αλλά μεταβέλκεν εκ του θανάτου εστίν ζωή. Αμήν, αμήν λέω εμείς, ότι έρχεται ώρα και νύνεστη, ότι οι νεκροί ακούσονται της φωνής του Υιού του Θεού και ακούσονται ζήσονται. Ως περγαλβατήρ έχει ζωή εν αυτό, ούτως έδωκε και το Υιό ζωή έχει εν αυτό, εξουσίαν έδωκε εν αυτό και κρίσιν την, ότι ως ανθρώπου εστί. Μη θαυμάζετε τούτο, ότι έρχεται ώρα, εν οι πάντες οι εν της πλημμύς ακούσονται της φωνής αυτού, και εκπορεύσονται και τα αγαθά ποιήσαντες εις Ανάσταση ζωή, και δε τα φαύλα πράξαντες εις Ανάστης εν κρίσεως. Ου δύναμαι εγώ πιν με αυτού που δεν, καθώς σου αποκρίνω και οι κρίσεις ή εν μη δικαίστη εστί, ότι ου ζητώ το θέλημα το εμπό, αλλά το θέλημα του πέμψαντος με Πάτρος.
Ελέησον ημάς ο Θεός, καλά το μέγα ελαιός σου, δεόμεθά σου επάκουσον και ελέησον. Έτσι δεόμεθα υπέρ μακαρίας μνήμης και αιωνιών απαύσεως ψυχής του κοιμηθέντος δούλου Θεού και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου. Και υπέρ της χωρηθήνε αυτό παμπλημέλημα εκούσιόντε και ακούσιον. Όπου ο Κύριος ο Θεός τάκτην ψυχήν αυτού ενθετεί και αναπαύονται τα ελέη του Θεού, την βασιλεία των ουρανών και άφησεν των αυτοαμαρτιών παρά Χριστό το θανάτο, βασιλεί και Θεό ημών ετισόμεθα. Παράσχε Κύριε.
Του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν. Ο Θεός των πνευμάτων και πάσης σαρκός, των θάνατον καταπατήσας, των δε διάβολων καταργήσας και ζωήν το κόσμος δωρησάμενος. Αυτός, Κύριε, ανάπαυσον και συγχώρησον την ψυχήν του κοιμηθέντος δούλου σου και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου, εν τόπο φωτεινό, εν τόπο χλωερό, εν τόπο αναψύξεως, εν θα απέδρα πάσα οδύνη, λύπη και στεναγμός. Παναμάρτημα το παραυτού πραχθέν, εν λόγω, η έργο, η διανία, ως αγαθός και φιλάνθρωπος Θεός συγχώρησον. Ότι ούκ έστιν άνθρωπος, ο ζήσεται επί της γης και ούχ αμαρτής. Σιγαρμόνος, Κύριε, εκτός αμαρτίας υπάρχεις, η δικαιοσύνη σου, δικαιοσύνη στον αιώνα και ο λόγος σου αλήθεια. Ότι η Ανάστασης, η ζωή και η μακαρία ανάπαυσης του κοιμηθέντος δούλου σου και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου, Χριστέ ο Θεός ημών, και εσύ την δόξαν αναπέμπομεν, το ανάρχο σου Πατρί, το Παναγίο και αγαθό και ζώπιο σου πνεύματι, νυν και αεί και εις τους αιώνας των αιώνων.
Του Κυρίου δεηθόμεν, ότι εσύ Ανάστας ζωή και μακαρή ανάπαυσης του κοιμηθέντος δούλου Θεού και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου, Χριστέ ο Θεός ημών, και δόξα να πέμπομεν συν τον άρχο σου Πατρί και το Παναγίο και αγαθό και ζώπιο σου πνεύμα την νυν και αεί και σε αιώνας των αιώνων.
Και κειμένου του Θεού Γεωργίου Χριστέ ο Θεός ημών, και εσύ την δόξα να πέμπομεν συν τον άρχον σου Πατρί και το Παναγίο και αγαθό και ζώπιο σου πνεύμα την νύχια και εις αιώνας των αιώνων.
Δόξα σοι Χριστέ ο Θεός, η ελπίς ημών, Κύριε δόξας, ο και νεκρών και ζώντων την εξουσίαν έχων, ως αθάνατος βασιλεύς και αναστάς εκ νεκρών, Χριστός ο αληθινός Θεός ημών, τες πρεσβείες της Παναχράντου και Παναμόμου Αγίας αυτού Μητρός, των Αγίων ενδόξων και πανεφήμων Αποστόλων, των Οσίων και Θεοφόρων, πατέρων και μητέρων ημών, των Αγίων ενδόξων προπατώρων Αβραάμ, Ισαάκ και Ιακώβ, του Αγίου και δικαίου φίλου αυτού, Λαζάρου, του τετραημέρου, την ψυχήν του εξημών μεταστάντος δούλου αυτού και αδελφού ημών Γεωργίου, εν σκηνές δικαίων τάξε,
Αμήν.
εν κόλπης Αβραάμ αναπαύσε,
Αμήν.
και με τα δικαίων συναριθμίσε,
Αμήν.
ημάς δε λεήσε και σώσε, ως αγαθός, φιλάνθρωπος και ελεήμων Θεός. Αιωνία σου η μνήμη αξιομακάριστε, και αείμνηστε αδελφέ ημών.
Αιωνία σου η μνήμη αξιομακάριστε, και αδελφέ ημεν Γεώργιε.
Των Αγίων Πατέρων ημών, Κύριε Ιησού Χριστέ ο Θεός, ελέησον και σώσον ημάς. Αμήν. Θα ήθελα να πω πριν αρχίσουν οι ομιλίες ότι η ταφή θα λάβει χώρα δίπλα εδώ στο Primrose, στο κημητήριο, και μετά η οικογένεια καλεί όλους ή όσους μπορείτε να περάσετε δίπλα στο χολ, να τους κρατήσουμε παρέα και να πιούμε έναν καφέ στην μνήμη του Γιώργου. Ευχαριστώ. Είναι εντάξει το ύψος εκεί?
Είναι και τόσο ψηλός.
Πιο κοντός είσαι, θέλει να
πιο κοντός. First of all, good morning, and thank you for joining us to celebrate the life of a very kind, very generous, and one of the true gentlemen that we know. For us, time is finite. We meet people along the way, and we never know how long they'll be with us. Some will be for a year, some for 5 years, some for 10 years, some for 100 years. But for the people that we love, that time is never enough. We can never spend enough time with them, and they're always gone too soon. And George was definitely one of those people that went far, far, far too soon for us. He was a big man, and he had even a bigger and generous heart. Over the years, he had helped many, many people, and never once did he ever ask for anything in return. In fact, I think he got ill a couple of months ago, and I think it was kind of his way of easing us into what was going to happen, inevitably, on Monday evening. I think that was the kind of person he was. That was the generosity he had, and that was the passion he had for the people around him. In the village of Senderwood, George was definitely a central figure. You could possibly call him the mayor of Senderwood, I think. Everybody knew George. Everybody knew Mimos. And there was I don't think there was one person that didn't respect him or knew where he was, or kind of always went for him for help. He had watched kids, come through Saheti and other schools from a young age, grow up, get married, have their kids. And this is the kind of person he was. But he wasn't only kind of in Senderwood. He extended all boundaries. And judging by the messages we've got messages from all over the world, from the States, from Norway, from Australia, from Zimbabwe, from Bedford View. I mean, he really extended all boundaries, our young George. He's definitely left a big void and a very big emptiness in our life. George had incredible knowledge. He was well-read, he enjoyed reading, and he knew everything about everything. He knew stuff. George knew stuff. You know, you'd ask him about Greek literature, he would tell you. You'd ask him about sport, he knew anything about sport. Whether, you know, he was just he had an amazing brain, an amazing thirst for knowledge. And he was always happy to tell you about everything. He also had a very colorful and wide vocab. And I must say, I suffered probably the most, and I was the brunt of a lot of his little linguistic prowess. He often referred to me as the Kolokipre, or Garpuz or Kefalo, which, if one translated, means a watermelon head. But I never took offense to George, and I knew it came out of a place of love. In 2009, Angela and I had a son, and we thought long and hard about his name, and we called him Alexi, Alexandra. George decided this wasn't good enough and called him Galiganzaro, which roughly translated means a goblin or something. That name's kind of stuck. George was a son, he was a brother, he was a cousin, a godfather, and a very, very dear friend to many, many people sitting in here. Over time, we often use the word gentleman to describe people. George epitomized this word. He was definitely the complete and utter gentleman. In every way, he treated people with respect across the ages. So whether you were 9 years old or 90 years old, he would talk to you and treat you in the same manner. And I think this is the lesson we can learn from George going forward. Is definitely take that with us. I just want to call a few people to speak, and I think starting off with Jota, and then I'm going to call Stefano, Alexandros, and Alexandra. After that, we'll have Panayota and Anushka, and then George Barbs. So I think. Aki knows it's like that.
Why are you stressing? We're here because don't stress. Έλα κοντά.
Aki's not a man of many words, and has struggled to put to words the bond and memories that he has shared. Today I'm sharing a few words from Aki to George. Nobody could wish for a better brother. He was a brother to me, all his cousins, and friends too. George, you were always around the corner, 5 minutes away. And although that was often not literal, and we waited hours for you to arrive, and you were often late, you were there when it counted the most. We will never forget the day when Jota went into early labor and you dropped everything to come to the hospital to be by my side. You stood by Mom and Dad, Jota, me, and the boys, traveled to Panayota and Strato's wedding, and represented us all on so many occasions. You were a role model to us of how to set aside the little things to make sure you were there to celebrate the important moments in life. You loved the boys, your godchildren, and cousins' children fiercely and spoke about each of them as if they were your own. It is no surprise that they love you so much. George and I grew up surrounded by friends and family, and the house was often referred to as the Gafanio. With the same love and philotimo as our mother, George always gave his time generously and loved everyone like family. I've been humbled by the messages that we have received personally and on social media. This is the testimony of the person George was. George was a man who did not have a mean bone in his body, a warm, friendly man who made his mark in the world, not with grand gestures or fancy titles, but the basic goodness and generosity of his character, and by the quality of his involvement in the life of his neighborhood, community, and circle of friends. There were many wonderful aspects to George's life and numerous ways in which he touched our lives. He will be remembered as a wonderful brother, a loving uncle, a great friend, a cousin, and a friendly face in Senderwood. In many ways and more, George made our lives richer and fuller. Now that he has passed away, of course, there is emptiness, pain, confusion, and maybe even anger, but to a great extent, the gift of George's life is still with us. He lives on in our memories and stories, and what all of us have become because of him. Let us all continue to share memories and stories, and in this way, we will keep George's legacy alive. Thank you for all that you have done for me, George. We love you.
So, yeah, okay. Yeah. Although we feel so sad and heartbroken at the loss of our uncle and Nono, we have so many wonderful memories that will remain with us forever. Nono, one of our favorite memories was playing rough with you, as you walked through and traumatized us with his math lessons. Exhausted from trying to explain techniques, he'd ask to lay down for just 10 minutes, and 2 hours later, we would battle to wake him up to carry on. There were numerous occasions when Nono came along on holiday with us. On one of our trips, after a long day of sightseeing, we went to the top of the Empire State Building. With great excitement, we ran outside to enjoy the view over New York, but we soon realized Nono was missing. Scared of heights, he remained plastered against the wall. Nono, you made us laugh, you toughened us up, loved us like your own, and you're always very proud of our achievements.
No, we'll always love you, and we'll always make you proud, and you are the king of Senderwood.
On behalf of Greg, Nono's other godchild, I'll be saying a few words. Dear Nono, thank you for all the memories that I'll always keep in my heart. You were always so funny and made me laugh until my tummy hurt, especially when you fell asleep in the middle of a movie. You really love to sleep. I miss you and will always love you. Love, Greg. And lastly, for Nono's club and the fellow Liverpool supporters, here is your song, Nono. Sorry, United fans. Okay.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of a storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet
There's no ice cream now from Nana. I think I can be Nana.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Alexandra, and I'm very blessed to be able to call George my nono. For those of you who don't know what that is, my godfather. A story I was recently told was how nono was actually became a part of my life and my family's life, and how George was actually one of my dad's very first friends in South Africa. My dad moved to South Africa from Greece in 1972. He was sent to Rembrandt Primary School, not speaking a word of English, and the principal there said to my grandfather, "Don't worry, we have the perfect Greek boy waiting for you." And lo and behold, there was George waiting for my dad. They went about their day, and my dad said to George, "Listen, I've got a little bit of money from my dad. Don't really know how the school system works here. Would you go get us some lunch?" And George comes back, my dad's ready for, maybe a sandwich or just something. And George comes back with a packet of chips for my dad. So my dad kind of was like, okay. And he looked at Nono, and Nono had like a 3-course meal for himself. So hot dogs, drinks, chips, the whole works. And then continued to give my dad back his change for the chips. And that kind of, that was the day that their friendship started. And from then on, Nono's family adopted my dad's family and welcomed them with open arms into South Africa. And everything important from there, they did together going on in life. So when I was born, George asked my parents if he could christen me and be part of my life in a big and beautiful way, helping me to guide me through life and support me. And my parents, obviously, with no doubt, said, of course. Although he wasn't impressed when my mom convinced him that part of his duties as a godfather was to change all my nappies. When thinking of Nono when I was younger, my main memories consist of going to Mimo's and make pizzas and drink milkshakes. When I was there, no matter how many customers or kids were around, Nono always made it feel like everyone was there for me. I was the most important person there. It was kind of like my own little South African Disneyland. That feeling made up for the times he forgot me at school, which were multiple times. If we weren't at the restaurant, Nono would come over to swim when it got too hot. At the shop and spend hours being tortured by my brother and I in the swimming pool. However, that stopped many years ago when Nono realized that instead of swimming and doing exercise in the pool, he could instead come to our house during the middle of a workday and take naps instead. As I grew up, our relationship evolved, and Nono continued to be an integral part of my life. All I needed to do was take a short walk down to Mimo's, and I would be greeted with his beaming face, always so excited to hear about what was going on in my life, whether it be as trivial as boy problems or as significant as religion and my future. One thing for certain, there was always a plate of chicken strips, a Coke Zero, and always a suggestion of some whiskey. When we had our weekly, what Nono called coffee dates, Nono would always used to apologize when people interrupted us. But I loved seeing how connected he was with so many people in our community. I admired his ability to make anyone who came into his environment feel welcome. When I was in Nono's presence, I always felt so safe. I could tell him anything, and there would never be any judgment. Those weekly conversations sometimes were light-hearted and just brought a smile to my face and food in my stomach. But many of them helped guide me in life and formed a part of what made me who I am today. The last conversation I had with Nono before he went to hospital was just before I left for England. Nono told me two things. He told me that whatever I choose going forward in life, to make sure that I keep my happiness as the focal point, and that it is okay to put myself first. And secondly, that he would be the proudest and happiest dad if he had the privilege of having me as his daughter. No, I'll continue to try and make you proud and always keep in mind the advice you gave me. Thank you for everything. Thank you for making Dad a part of your family. Thank you for being an anchor for Mama and providing her with an invaluable friendship. Thank you for always being there for Dimitri with a milkshake and a joke in hand. No, you are not just my godfather. You are my mentor, my friend, and my family. My heart breaks knowing that I won't ever share another meal or conversation with you, have another hug, or hear another, "What's happening, Kukla?" But my heart is full because I got to have you in my life, and I will forever have you in my memory. I'm so grateful that I got to experience the last precious moments of your life with you. And I love you and miss you forever, Nono.
This is a message from Theo Dimitri, Thea Marionka, Ruli, Tony, Panayota Tasso, Alexa Bavan and kids. George was a very special nephew and cousin. In our family of 3 girls, he was the brother we never had. He was the kindest, most generous and humble person you could ever hope to meet. He had the biggest heart and was always there to support and help anyone in need. Many of our fondest memories was when George would visit our family home spontaneously during the week, and in a matter of minutes of his arrival, the phone would ring. It would be Thea Patra, who, after making several frantic calls to other members of the family, with exasperation would ask, "O Yorgos είναι εκεί?" To which George would calmly reply, "Έρχομαι τώρα, Mama," and then promptly sit down for another 2 hours. George had a great sense of humor, and his laughter was so contagious. We knew whenever we were with him, there would be an endless amount of fun and laughter. We have an infinite number of special memories of being with George and all the cousins together. He especially loved to tease our parents and referred to them as Uncle Dim and Auntie Bright. What made this hilariously funny was that Theo Dimitri never quite understood the intended pun, let alone many of the jokes that George made at his expense. But this never deterred George, despite being told several times by his uncle, "Skasevre, ta se pnikso." Losing George so soon has left us all heartbroken. We can't quite believe that we will never see him again. We love him so much and always will. He holds a very special place in our hearts. We will miss you terribly, George. Aki, Yota, Stefano, and Alexandro, our thoughts are with you in this difficult time. And just a few words from me. George, you have left a huge hole in my life. And nothing will ever replace that other than the richness of the memories that I have of growing up with you, Aki, my brother, and the Manyas clan. Weekends in our house were filled with the noise of everyone wrestling downstairs, board games, rounders, and a few stitches and broken windows. We were one big family, and George always reminded us of our childhood bond in a way that he loved each of us as individuals and as a group. Even when physical distance came between us, George continued to make an effort to travel overseas to see us all, to share the joy of weddings and births. George, Anushka, shared a memory of you tossing 11-month Lazaro between you and Nicholas. In that video, you apologized to my husband, Leslie, that he lost out and that Lazaro is a Manyas. Watching it, I realized what you meant. As a Manyas, you can act tough when life throws you about because your family is there to catch you. You stepped in, caught me, and were there for me on so many occasions. George, you banished fears and doubts, lifted me up, pushed me. Panayota, you know you can do it, you'd say. And much of what I've achieved and got through was because of you. I love you forever. And a few words from my husband, Leslie. George, I often joke with Panayota that you're her only number one. We shared the kids' reports, photos, and milestones with you, and you always praised them with a heartfelt bravo, even when we phoned you in hospital recently. You were Panayota's shoulder to lean on and the only good enough soundboard. The day you surprised Panayota in England when she gave birth to Katerina will never be forgotten. You were and always will be 100%. George, you should be proud that you did not run your race in vain and that your work was not useless. Rejoice, as your life was a faithful offering of service to all who share the joy of your life here today.
For all those who know me, you'd know that speaking in front of so many people is terrifying to me. George often used to tease me and tell me I'd peaked socially when speaking to more than 3 people. So when asked to speak, I was obviously quite anxious and nervous, but I wanted to do my bit and say my goodbye to George. While I was writing the speech, a memory came back to me. A few years ago, something had happened, and I didn't agree with it. It made me cross. So, of course, I went off to George to get some advice. And I said, even though what's happening is not correct, I don't feel I should speak. It's not my place. He sat me down and he said to me, Anushka, you must always remember, you were raised by a strong woman, and strong woman raised your mother and all of us. He told me that if something is wrong, I must correct it, no matter what. George, to collect just a few memories we have shared with you, to put into a short speech was impossible. For hours and hours I tried picking a few of my favorites, and let me tell you, that was no easy task. In your life you touched so many. You were one of the most loved people I know. One of our earliest memories of you is when we were young. You arrived at our house very drunk, and you were too scared to go home to your parents. We were on our way to the circus, so my mom decided you will come with us. You spent the whole show laughing your head off, and who was sitting on your shoulders at the time, underneath the grandstand and into the mud. Over the years, you used to babysit the 3 of us often. You taught us that it was okay to play cricket inside the house. On one particular evening, alone, you, me, and my brothers broke valuable statues, vases, and an antique glass panel. All 4 of us got to work to put everything back together and hide the evidence. I'm proud to say we kept the secret for so long that today will be the first time my mother realizes half the contents of our house are being held together by superglue. George, you were there right from our births and into our adulthood. You took us in when we were at our lowest. You provided a safe space for my brothers and I to heal. You gave us guidance, love, and you were always there with a helping hand and an ear. Your love and support of our mom and how protective you always were of her is something we are so grateful for. She adored you. And keeping the secret just between us, I think you were her favorite cousin. Being very naughty children, we did some questionable things, one of them being throwing a huge house party when our parents went away. You arrived the next morning. You had been invited to the party, but forgot to come. Surprise, surprise. When you walked into the house, you burst out laughing. It was a disaster. It took us an hour to find the kettle to make coffee. It was under the dining room table. All these years later, we're still not sure why. You got in your car, went and got us food, and then spent the rest of the day laughing at us while we frantically cleaned the house. And just how you took care of us growing up, you then carried on with the next generation when Evie was born. You made sure I was okay when I was expecting her, and always made sure I'd eaten enough food, especially Mimo's lasagna, which I craved the whole 9 months. You loved our Evie so much, and became such an important person in her life. Creating the memories we made during lockdown is something we will always treasure, and we are so grateful we got to spend all that time with you. From creating your own rock band together, to teaching Evie how to play Rummy Cup, and of course the highlight being the 4 of us winning the online quiz. These are the things that will stay with us forever. Evie will miss your daily wrestling matches, which 90% of the time would end up with either one or both of you in need of some kind of medical intervention, tears, or both. If we had to choose what we'll miss the most about you, it would be your love and presence in our lives. You cried with us at our worst, you laughed with us until we could not laugh anymore, and not once did you ever judge us, even though we did a lot of silly things. Paddy will miss your Sunday morning chats while watching the news, documentaries, and the highlights from the previous night's soccer. My brothers will miss sitting watching soccer with you, eating P&C, all 3 of you in your underwear. To do business, you must advertise, you always said. Helping Nick clean the carpet is a story you always love to tell, and a memory my brothers will hold on to forever. I know Nick loved going to rugby and football games with you, and Strata will miss the tea with biscuits you used to have together every night while watching American football and basketball. Going to Woolworths for pies, chocolates, and ice cream is a tradition my brothers will continue. Your Mr. Nicholas and your Halva will miss you. I'm going to miss our daily screaming matches and fights the most. You used to call me the pain in your side. You always told Paddy that I'm crazy, and if he ever decided to run away, nobody would blame him. I don't know who's going to shout at me all the time now. George, you were our protector. You loved us more than I can explain. You are our big brother, a hero. To our family, you were everything. You have left a huge void in our lives. All we can say is thank you for everything you have done, for everything you were, and for the privilege of having had you in our lives. We love you more than we can explain, and we will miss you forever. On behalf of Aki Yota, Alexander Stefano, and our family, we'd like to say thank you to everyone for being here, for the love and support over the last 5 months. We thank you. Every message, phone call, offer of help and love did not go unnoticed. To George and Maria Barbaresos and the rest of George's gang, we thank you for your help, your updates on the groups, checking in with us, and always offering a kind word, help, and advice. George was blessed to have so many amazing friends. I want to say thank you to my mom, who has been so strong through all of this, even though she is hurting so much. You have carried us all through the last 5 months. Naki, from me, thank you for everything you have done for George the last few months and always. You both had George's back right till the end, and Papunya Ya would be so proud. Family and friends from far away, thank you for always checking in, giving support and love. You have been our strength. And just a few thank yous I need to say for myself. Michael, I need to thank you. You saw George every day, always make sure he had eaten, he was clean, shaven, and just sat with him, giving him lots of love and company. No amount of thank yous will be enough for what you have done for George and us. And Villa, you've been my rock. I can't even begin to thank you for everything. In case I've missed anyone, it wasn't done on purpose, but I don't want to get into trouble, so I'm going to be cheeky and throw a quote from George. You don't do good things for thank yous, you do them because they're the right thing to do. We always said George was the glue that kept our family together, and that has never been more evident in the last 5 months. Watching the whole family come together, speaking every day, supporting each other to help George has been amazing to see. May we keep that bond strong, even though he's gone, and continue his legacy.
Thanks. I just want to call on Gary and then George Barbs. Thanks.
Morning, everyone. Wow, to have made such an impression on so many young people is really an honor. And that really speaks to who George was. George wasn't just our classmate. He was our lifelong friend. As one of our classmates said after his passing, he was one of the best of us. Our times at Saheti were happy times that we all shared as we navigated uncharted territory and as we played our small part in the establishment of the successful school that Saheti is today. This brought with it many firsts, but one thing's for sure, that none of these would have been as memorable as they are to us without George having been part of it. George was always part of everything. From the flamboyant school plays, to public speaking contests, to Greek dancing, from breaking into the school tuck shop, to blowing up the boys' toilets, to being drunk after a school play. He tackled all of these with passion and uncompromising vigor. But most of all, he enjoyed every single moment to its fullest. Alongside his classmates, George immersed himself in the challenge of creating the first rugby team at Saheti. He played a vital role as loose side prop and was a key driver in the successes of this team. His joy when given the opportunity of barreling into the opposing team was always a spectacle and an inspiration to all of us. As many of us had emigrated from South Africa quite early on, George, who had established his business, Mimos, strategically in Senderwood, and as was said earlier, had become the mayor of Senderwood, became the central hub for all of us, and he made reconnections with each other possible. George's phenomenal memory was a foundation of our collective recollection of our lives, as we could always rely on him to remind us of the memories that began to fade as the years passed by. We could rely on him for anything, to remember names, events, and every little detail of our school lives. Such was his love for our years together. He was immensely proud of his Greek heritage and of his family roots. This, together with his passion and enjoyment of his relationships, was to characterize much of what George did. He was an integral part of everything that went on around him. He forged lifelong friendships with many of us, friendships based on brotherly love, which have lasted for more than 46 years. This is testament to his warmth, his kindness, and most of all, to his humanity. In the words of Eleanor Roosevelt, many people will walk in and out of your life, but only true friends will leave footprints on your heart. We can all say in unison that George was such a true friend, and these words truly encapsulate the feeling we all have for him as his classmates and his friends, and we have had the privilege of sharing our school years and beyond with him. May God keep you in his arms forever.
Εμπρός τρελοκομείο. I'm going to miss that. George would always open up with Εμπρός τρελοκομείο. He had a way with words. He had his unique names for us. Καρπουζοκέφαλε, Καλικάνζαρο, Χαζό, Ξυπνητήρι, and he actually had his own nickname, which he didn't publicize for some reason, Arkuda. And as for his colorful language, expletives that made anybody blush when you heard them for the first time. But when you got to know George, we realized that his bark was always worse than his bite. Before I carry on, I just want to say that it is difficult being the last one because it's all been said before. But I think that's what George was. What you saw was what you got. And those experiences of love and laughter, we all shared from different angles. So I thought I'd just share some words that I believe described George Hadge. Our go-to guy, rides to and from the airport. Please pick us up, the car's broken down. Please get me this from Macro. Please organize this for us, and so on. And if he didn't do it himself, he always knew a guy. George's network was unbeatable. Generosity and an open heart. George was all heart and kindness. The Georges of Senderwood charity was one of his greatest achievements, and he took huge pride and joy out of giving back and helping. Any opportunity to help the community, be it the Greek Old Age Home, churches, fundraisers, were projects he signed up for without hesitation, with great enthusiasm. Barea. George couldn't be on his own. He lived and longed for Barea 24/7, and he could strike up a deep conversation with anyone at any time, anywhere. I love that George would call it around 10 p.m. after locking up the shop. Anekdoto kafeneo. Titha fame. Impromptu, anytime, the door was open because George's home was everywhere. Viveos legame, and he would visit for no reason other than to hang out. How cool is that? How many of us do that? The Platia in Senderwood was his haven. It won't be the same. Forever poorer without our George. His nephews told us a little bit about his skills, maths, memory, and all things Greek. Apart from his incredible expanse of general knowledge, George had a brilliant grasp of maths, and he jumped at the challenge of tutoring his nephew. Now I realize that on the other side lay terror. Anything to do with the evolution of the Greek community in Johannesburg since 1964, one would refer to Hadjipedia, which existed long before Google. He knew names, places, dates relating to not only our generation, but their entire family tree, dating back generations, grandparents, the shops they owned, when they arrived in South Africa, and everyone's maiden names. George was fiercely loyal to the Patrida, from his mom's island, Primrose, to Greek history across the ages, across regions. He loved Greek music, Laika in particular. He really didn't have a great singing voice, but he knew his stuff. And he had a deep passion for the Greek language, apart from his trademark vrisivi, which he was very articulate in. He would correct us whenever necessary. When we were stuck with Greek homework, he was the go-to guy again, always available, and he took any academic challenge very, very seriously. People. George loved people. It was said earlier, but his unconditional love transcended generations. Respect for the elderly and a soft spot for kids. I'm just so glad to see that that came through. He loved all kids, showed unconditional love whether they were family, friends, or customers. His eyes would light up with pride whenever he spoke of his precious godchildren, Alexandra, Alexandro, and Greg, or his nephews, and actually all of our children that he considered and cared for and loved as his own. His great joy was to share in their achievements, and he was just proud of everybody. And the elders, he would vividly recount lessons and saying from his parents, from his Theas and Theos, that he absolutely revered. I had something here about Liverpool, but let's move on. We've been tortured enough as a Chelsea supporter. Home for George was out there. He extended his home into our homes and hearts. He was family to all of us. Mimo Senderwood was his home, and he made it a safe place for all of us and our families through his warmth and welcoming demeanor. For over 20 years, it became an institution for Davli players, soccer fanatics, kids' parties, memorable family functions, first dates, magician shows, Suvla Sundays, charity events, and the list goes on. Spirituality. George believed His mantra was, Doxa Sio Theos. It was no coincidence that Psychosavator fell over the weekend that he started fading, a week ago today. Agion Pneumatos was the day that he passed, Monday the 13th. And Father's Day is tomorrow. Fitting indeed, as he was a father figure to so many youngsters in the neighborhood and in the community. Spontaneity. We would chat every day. He would quickly say yes to impromptu dinner invites. If he said he was on his way, that meant that he would leave the shop in at least an hour's time. Invariably, he wouldn't pitch because somebody came in and he got into a deep conversation or he forgot himself. I actually think he used to get a better offer sometimes. And eventually we figured out his modus operandi, but he was never short of invitations. Time. Despite George's love for watches, time was not a strong point. If he was arranging this funeral, we'd be lucky to get through this by dinner. George's life contained many chapters, the early years, Scouts, Seheti, and then our chapter, Wits. I met George when he arrived at Greek Corner in 1982. He joined our glorious varsity years. He brought noise and life to the party, participating vigorously in all the fun stuff, socials, parties, poker evenings, soccer, crossword puzzles, and even some lectures, I believe. With his engaging laugh, energy, and character, he always made his presence felt. We were blessed with an amazing group of friends at a very special time that evolved into our Boy This gang, spread over 4 continents today. Between us all, we formed an unbreakable bond over the last 40 years, growing together through studies, careers, families, travels, and life experiences. George was the constant in our parea, from his home in Germiston, over decades, to becoming, as we've heard, the King of Senderwood, the Mayor of Senderwood. Never a parexigisi, always a keenness to visit, share, and hang out. George made friendship easy. I'd like to share some words from Thras that epitomize George. I have too many memories with George to share, but key for me was a generosity of spirit and selflessness. He was truly someone who loved unconditionally and gave everything he had, materially, emotionally, and spiritually, to his family, friends, and strangers. Somehow, he always had time for you. These are rare and precious attributes in today's world. In that way, George's values, family, hard work, generosity, deep friendship, were from a previous generation, and he carried the torch for these somewhat forgotten traits through to today. But George had a serious side too. He bemoaned injustice, and I enjoyed our conversations about global geopolitics and the inequities that this brings about. In short, George cared about each individual, each child, and the world as a whole. This is who George was. This is how big his heart was. And the tough part comes now, to say goodbye. Cheers, Hadj, I'll miss you. Fly free, my beloved friend.
We'll pay the last respect to George. We'll sympathize the family, and I would like to ask you if you can move quickly. I don't want to have any problems with the symmetry due to today's Saturday. Thank you.